I feel like.
And I have to be out of here by phone.
You're not getting that.
Yeah.
As they said, we had a meeting about. You just all over.
This is not what this was for. So you're on the same page as us. And we're not alone, because
You know
Hey, Joe.
we don't get Lupin. Thank you. Andy, did you say you got a brand new one this week? Oh, he didn't notice. He didn't even notice. I'm not seeing something.
Cool.
Okay.
should be on the website. Jill, the link for today's meeting is on the website.
City website? Yes.
Yep, it's on the front page of the website.
It should be. We're going to go ahead and get started. We do have a pretty packed agenda for today, so I want to be conscientious of everybody's time. I know people have to leave here right at noon, so let's go ahead and get started. I will call this meeting to order at 9:02 a.m. If we can start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So for those of you that are in the gallery, please make sure that your cell phones are either off or on silent. Council members, the same, and make sure that your cell phones are off the desktops. City Clerk Domingo, will you take roll call for us, please?
Councilmember Williams.
Present.
Reed. Jackson.
Here.
Fowler.
Here.
Ada.
Present.
Grant.
Here.
I am here. All right, so we are going to work on our 23 strategic goals. What we'll work for and from as we proceed through the new year as a council. We do have consultants here to help us with this process. So I will go ahead and turn.
I'll turn it over to Greg and then we can go from there.
Okay, so Greg, I will turn the floor over to you so that you can help lead us through this process.
Thank you very much. There any problem? I know you, I think you're for this. Is there any problem with my moving around the room?
Nope, because the owl will follow you.
I assumed this, but the other thing is, I'll refer to you on this, Haley. I know there are portions of this where we're going to want to split up into two separate rooms.
Yeah.
I know that's going to complicate things from a Zoom presentation, so I don't know how you are necessarily going to want to address that. You know, we'll be convening back here for group discussion. But I'm going to have to defer to you. Those logistics are going to be an issue at all.
I don't think so. That we did that when we did our planning session last year. We broke up into smaller groups and then reconvened kind of to have the overall discussion. So it was that discussion was captured. We'll keep the recording going. So I don't see an issue with that.
And then I thought I understood that I need some presentations before I get started with this. Is that still the plan?
Yes. So Councilmember Williams asked that we have our EDC director as well as
A few of the local grassroots organizations, youth organizations that we have in this program. Just allowing them a few minutes. When we do discuss those things, we will take into consideration.
And would you like to have that input at the outset here so that, I mean, I
like to have it.
I just want to make sure that that takes place where both stop at time for your conversation. So I'm happy to sit back down and let you listen to those folks and then jump back into the presentation if that's agreeable to you, Madam Mayor.
Sounds good. Yes, we can go ahead and do our public comment portion right now. That way, folks, you don't have to stay for the entire study session. So once you say your piece and give your insight, then you're more than free to stay or you are able to go. So we will go ahead and open up the floor to anybody who would like to stand, address council, and you will have 3 minutes to do so. All we need is your name and address
Floor is yours.
Morning, my name is Milton Barnes, 901 Beacon Road. I'm here representing VIII Sports Academy, one of the community programs that goes into the young people. VIII, like many other programs here in Albion, often struggle with financial support to maintain year-round service. Certainly, I think it's important that we provide as much as we can for our young people. One of the things we do is sports, obviously basketball, t-ball, and many other sport activities. So our main objective is to really concentrate on academic and character development. So the thing is that, if there's funds available, certainly I'm hopeful that not just VIII, but so many other youth organizations get the proper support.
Thank you, Bill.
Someone's behind you, Joe. Someone's behind you, Joe.
Good morning.
My name is Odessa Brown, and I am here to speak about my program. It's called the Mentor Program. It began about 20 years ago, so the chapter that I went into is getting the kids and understanding where to get the money and how to find it. So we focus on character building as well. Most of our kids are when they 10 and 13, and we focus a lot on character building, family relationships, things like that, bullying and things like that. So it will be helpful sometimes to get information on how to get funding and how to get kids.
Ms. Odessa, have you applied for any grants through the foundation office? So that might be an option. We can definitely get that information. Mhm.
Good morning, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, Madam City Manager, and assembled guests. I'm Bill Calvert, and President of Albion College. I currently call 501 Michigan. My resident is the president of the college. Today I come before you to thank you for your continued partnership with the college. We are grateful for the combined efforts in the past and current projects and plans to move our community forward. Albion College would not be as vibrant as it is today without the city of Albion. City of Albion would not be robust without Albion College. The college continues to support Albion businesses and develop new employment opportunities. We strongly support increased local housing volume and building of a multi-use industrial park, serve a myriad of needs to help create jobs for the community. We are especially grateful for ongoing partnership with our campus safety and the Albion Public Department, Public Service. Several times throughout the year, we need to rely on those mutual services. We very much appreciate the support of the Albion Public Safety Department. This partnership is one of our most visible, if not the only one, and it's certainly not the only one we have. But we did want to reach out and thank the city for the continued support they do, and we look forward to developing even more partnerships as we move forward in the coming year. Together, we think we can create this vision for the future of the college at Albion that we can have together and working together. So we're here to support and thank everybody for coming here on a Saturday for what they're doing. Take care.
Thanks, Joe.
All right, now the portion that I asked for Virgie, I asked specifically for a 15-minute time block in my email. And we set that aside so that she can present so that the overlap won't have to take place in a later discussion than we have today.
So you want her to go now? Reggie, you ready? Okay.
Thanks, Reggie. Assume I'm supposed to share this with
So Reggie, before you go, was there anybody else in the chambers that wants to address council before Virgie does her presentation?
curious.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Ruby Ammerman. I live at 305 in Homer. I'm the current president and CEO of the Albion Economic Development Corporation. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you so much for welcoming me home. So this has been an exciting 4 or so months, and I'm excited to be back. I brought a presentation for you today that I also shared with the EDC board on Thursday morning. So this is my 2023 goals and plans for the EDC. I would anticipate getting formal approval on this from the EDC for the next meeting. However, I did want to get it to them and then get it to you. And if there's any feedback, you know, it would be good to get those changes in before we formally adopt. I'd like to present this sort of in the way I wrote it, if you don't mind. So if you go to page 14. So from 14 to the end of this presentation are excerpts from the EDC's 4-year plan that was adopted last year. So 22 to 26, these are some components that I chose to focus on for this year. And you'll see there are segments of focus on some downtown issues, housing, and then a lot of focus on jobs. So just for your reference, that's coming right out of the EDC. And then pages 4 through 13 are excerpts coming out of the city plan. So my goal here is to make sure that we're aligning, and there are lots of places in the city plan where the EDC can be effective. So trying to make sure that with the limited resources we all have, that we're managing, you know, these critical areas. For me, one of the most critical economic drivers for 23 and beyond will be housing, because with any law, mega site comes in and we're going to need that kind of housing. So mega site, of course, you know, the Marshall area and searching in his downtown. So we're very excited that that will come rich and lots of jobs. The other thing we'll see is really critical is workforce development and training, because they're going to need people in those facilities. The other thing that the other biggest economic driver will be the development of the what we're calling the new Albion Industrial Park, because we have 250 plus acres sitting out off of Michigan Avenue that is designated to become what we're going to call the supplier park. So hopefully mega site comes through, we build a supplier park for that mega site, and anyone else here in Albion that currently wants to grow, or any other industry that wants to come in. So working very diligently with the state to get the resources necessary to really promote that. And then we'll be partnering, of course, with the city for infrastructure and assisting and finding ways to make that happen with as very few tax dollars as possible. So that would be the goal. So page 1 is just the overall goals. I don't quickly go through them. We're looking to make sure that we're influencing regional strategies for economic growth. And that includes jobs, housing, training, community development, and infrastructure. We're looking to lead the economic development in the greater Albion area. So we're recently been asked to be on the EDC, the countywide EDC board. So I recently was appointed to that, and we'll continue to broaden that because we think Albion is a pivot to the greater counties, so success and livelihood. Listening to all community members and stakeholders, economic justice needs. So I listed broad community because that way, if I forgot somebody in particular, you can put them there. But in all reality, we have 7,500 people here in Albion. We'd love to know what 7,500 people, you know, see as their vision. So broad community, senior population, and receive some specific input as what they would like to see from that kind of growth. Underrepresented population, This came up during my interview process, it came up again during my orientation, and I want to make sure to do that up front. The college, we've asked the college for some feedback on what they are interested in seeing. Housing for folks, is really critical, especially, faculty and staff. And also, looking to grow the infrastructure, the park and bring in more workforce so we can have a more robust community. Albion City, we're here asking anytime, any day, please tell us what we can do, because we need a strong partnership that we can support all of you. And then the chamber, we work with plus people who chamber and how to bring new people to their membership, as well as to bringing unity into the. We have an Albion is marketing and communication plan, so you may have seen that new website, so we can get that off. And we're going to use that with Albion is whatever we want it to be, and Albion it already is certain other things, so we can use that every time we talk about marketing Albion. Then we have the new industrial park we just talked about. We want to incentivize development, expansion, growth, and retention. We want to focus on alignment of stakeholders so that as we're presenting ourselves to people, other communities under the state, that it's very consistent message. And then we want the model trustworthy leadership. So we want to make sure that at all times I am as transparent as completely possible. If mistakes are made, then we'll come to the table with those mistakes. Then the next 2 pages are known to applications that we are already either doing or will continue to do. And it's broken into 3 main categories. So in my mind, I'm kind of all breaking my day into these 2 categories. So industrial business attraction, retention, workforce development. These are the items that we're doing in those areas. Housing and community development, these are the items we're doing in those areas. And in the housing area, I'm trying to help learn more and understand how we're approaching each type of housing that we need. So we have always paths of housing, and they all require a different style of development and leadership and funding. So I'm trying to understand if we're taking advantage of all those different varieties. So I've been doing a lot of focusing and listening in that area. Then I've stopped listing project names in our minutes because it's just a little bit too comprehensive, but instead I gave them letters, and so hopefully that's helpful. Seniors have specific needs, both at a market rate and affordable, so that's a very specific population that has a different set of supports. HUD housing, whatever we can do to increase more HUD housing and or programming and or rehabilitate what we have. So we want to take advantage of opportunities to increase the quality of affordable housing that we have in the city currently. And then we talked about the college needs, food security. I didn't realize, but I'm happy to be a part of the food security mission, and that was in the EDC, and so I'm very excited about that because that is a passion that I brought, and so I'm excited to be able to be a part of that. I'm working to get more into the community to understand what we're doing. And then financial literacy. And we're working with a CSA program possibly for this year. Then just to wrap up the last of the 3 and the way I do my day long, growth and sustainability. So we can do awesome things today for the growth. How do we make it sustainable in the buildings? How are we developing staff? How are we getting more capacity? How are we taking the training and giving, and training our kids and making ourselves able and willing to do this work? And how are we partnering? Nothing happens in a vacuum, and the more transparency and the more openness would be the best. One of the things I'm very excited about right now is the MBDA Capital Readiness Program that will allow us to bring sort of force here into the community all the time. That would help new entrepreneurs. That would be very critical. and then the youth build program that we're partnering with STAR. So we're aligning, I feel like in a very short amount of time that people have allowed me to come into so many conversations and learn how to know. And I'm just very grateful for that. So this is what I would propose that our plan would be and the values that we would offer to you and to the greater.
Thanks, Bertie.
Thank
Appreciate it.
you.
One question. Sure.
Bertie, Miss,
I'm sorry.
that's okay.
Okay, just one question. I'm not sure what youth build is, but I wondered if you have like a youth advisory council or to get input from youth, because we can do senior citizens, but we need
Yeah,
to
sure.
get opinions from youth
Sure.
also.
So Youth Build is a program that STAR is endeavoring to develop. And
Okay,
there's some funding available and it will be tying in construction trades and
right,
actually creating housing here in the city.
right.
However,
That's not what I,
but
yeah,
but
okay,
that doesn't mean that we can't also sort of tackle what you mentioned. We
right,
do have a new community engagement committee that
okay,
maybe could have a youth
representative.
representative. So that would be
Okay.
great. Okay.
That would be
I'll
good.
search for that.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Councilwoman Davis, the Youth Build program, I think they identify individuals who are 18 to 24-year-old.
Yes,
And so that's going to be a program hopefully coming to Opportunity High School, like Virgie was saying, in collaboration with Star Commonwealth, to kind of create construction trades.
right. I heard of it. I didn't know the name of it. I was focusing on youth input. So that's why youth bill maybe youth
Mhm.
input, but it's not. I remember what that one. Yes, all right, thank you.
Are you thinking of the other group or have us?
No, I'm thinking of maybe, I know, the Civic Foundation, Community Foundation has a youth advisory council. So I'm thinking to bring, ideas from our youth in terms of, maybe we want, a skating rink or a park, paddleboard park or something like that, but something, involving youth so they will feel a part of the community as well. Maybe an advisory council or someone sitting on the board, to just bring different perspective.
Awesome. Any other questions for Virgie? Before we proceed, anybody else in the gallery that would like to stand? Now is your opportunity before we go into our actual goal setting. We have anybody out? All right, so thank you all for your input. Greg, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, council members, and staff who are present here. It is my pleasure to be here and join you today for this session. My name is Fred Gutcho. You received a proposal from me for this. I want to introduce my brother, Jay Gutcho. Jay is my slightly younger and much taller brother. Just in case I needed to reach something high, I decided to bring him along. But the truth of the matter is that I intended to do this alone, which is how I typically do these. Jay has just joined me in the LLC as of the first of the year, and I thought, well, this is a good chance for him. It's fairly close by. He lives in Brooklyn. It's close by for him to come and see how I do this, so that when he has an opportunity to do this on his own, he has an understanding of how that methodology works. And then we get here and see what the arrangements are. And so I'm going to actually put him to work here. So at various times during the day here, I'm going to ask half of them to make their way into the conference room in the back here, where we'll have some small group discussions. Jay will go with you. I'll stay in here with the group that sticks around in here. And so my plan is, and please let me know if you have any concerns about this, but I'd like to, when we have small group discussions, have it be a mix of council members and staff. So I would request that maybe when we do this group here finds its way into the back, half of the staff members stick around in here. Does that seem acceptable to you, Madam Mayor?
Sound good? Yeah.
All right, very good. Well, I have the easy job here today. You are the ones who are going to be doing the work. My job is to help you begin to tell a story, and that story is what we refer to as the strategic agenda for the city of Albion. I don't call this a strategic plan. I call it a strategic agenda. Plans are things that go on shelves and people look at once in a while. Agendas are a list of tasks that you want to get accomplished. And so I think that that's what you're after here today is we work together on this. I look at this as a narrative, a story you want to tell. The power of what you develop is in part related to your ability to tell a story about that. It's not just a list of objectives on a hand out to people. It is a story as it flows with. So I'm here to help you tell that story. We're going to start out by talking a little bit about where we start from, this journey that the story is about, the journey you're going to take. We're going to talk about our starting point. We're going to talk about where we're looking to go, talk about a little bit the paths we want to take to get there, and the modes of transportation that we're going to use, you're going to use in order to do that. We will not be able to tell the entire story today. We're going to do an outline. There will be a lot of work that you, working with Haley, working with the remainder of the staff here, will need to do to flesh out that story, to fill in the blanks, if you will, to be able to do that. So I want to get started here, and I will need to move this along fairly quickly. You've already used a little of your time, I think, very fruitfully to hear some folks in your community here, and I think that input is valuable to you as you begin to think about what your story looks like as you're moving forward into the next year. But there will be I'll need to make some adjustments here as we go here. So there may be some things that I intended to spend a little bit more time on, as I discussed in my proposal to you, that we're going to have to kind of truncate a little bit in order to keep you on schedule. And I certainly heard you, Madam Mayor, when you said that we're going to be done at noon. So I am determined to stay on that schedule. It's one of my rules, which is begin on time and end on time. You began on time. I am determined to have you end on time. So let's begin here. So I always, with any session that I facilitate, I have 4 primary ground rules. The first one is everyone participates. I want to make sure everybody feels they have an opportunity to make a contribution. All those contributions are taken into consideration. When we're together in a large group setting, only one person speaks at a time. And so that makes sure that everyone can hear what's going on. And it's especially important to me. I always like to point out when I begin a session like this, I suffer from hearing loss. And while I wear a hearing aid that helps me with that, the acoustics in this room aren't particularly great. Sometimes I will not hear something you said, or something you said in the way you intended for me to hear it. And so if I make a mistake, please understand that that is my fault. It's not yours. This is a congenital condition that I inherited from my parents, and somehow Jay didn't. But so he could be a little bit of my ears here as well today. All ideas are treated with respect. We don't have to agree with the opinion or a statement that somebody has made, but it is very important to me that we have an environment here where all of us are willing to listen and treat those opinions with respect, understanding that if it's an opinion, it's something that's probably strongly held by the person that's stating it. We owe them the courtesy of civility and to listen to what they say, even if it's not the same as our own opinion. And then finally, I ask that everybody stays on topic. We will have a number of different exercises we're doing here. There may be something that pops into your head and it's maybe the wrong thing to say at that particular time. It might have relevance later. Make a note of it. I actually have some note cards here. If you need to have something to write on, we have some in the other room as well. Try and stay on topic. I will, if need be, kind of usher you back onto the topic at hand. I want to begin talking about, and let me just apologize right at the very beginning. The early few minutes here, you're going to hear a lot from me. That's going to change as we go along here, where you'll be doing most of the talking. But I have a few preliminary comments that I want to make here, so you get a little bit of the college professor part of me at this point in time. But I promise that won't continue through the entire morning that we're here together. So we want to talk about the organizational context of strategic planning here. That is, what are you folks all doing here? How does strategic planning fit into what you do? This is the mission of the city of Albion. I don't know if you think about it, or the fact that you have a mission statement. When I go into a new community and I have worked now in a total of 9 communities, Jay's worked in another 3. Every one of them has something that you can find oftentimes someplace, in your case, in the city charter, that tells you what your mission is. In this case, your charter says the city shall have the power to do any action that good government and prosperity of the city and its inhabitants, and to protect the public peace, moral health, safety, and general welfare. That's what you do every day when you're here working. This is what motivates you. And my opinion is that it is some version of this is the mission for every other city government. We're here to protect the public health, safety, and welfare. When you're doing strategic planning, setting a strategic agenda, it is because it advances this very statement. You're interested in the welfare of your citizens here. You're interested in what serves their needs from the health and safety standpoint, and hopefully contributes to prosperity in the city, and certainly it's a part of good government. So let's talk about council member roles as it relates to the strategic planning process. The first role here, there's a number of roles that council members perform in council manager government, which you have here. And one of the first roles, and the one that you are exercising today, is as thought leaders in the community. People look to you as those people who are coming up with the ideas about where the community should be going. And so that thought leader role is what you're going to be exercising partly today. You're also policymakers. There are a number of different ways in which council sets policy. Strategic plans is one of those places, but you also do it through your ordinances, rules and regulations, budgets, resolutions, contracts, and those kinds of things. In this particular case, that policy role today is going to be through the strategic planning process. As you get to implementation, you are going to be then doing it through the adoption of budget, maybe through the adoption of ordinances, maybe through the adoption of rules and regulations as you look to what's necessary to implement the goals that you're setting for yourself. So returning to the roles here, the policymakers, you have a fiduciary role and an oversight role. And so as you're thinking about where you're going in the future here, you're going to want to make sure that you're protecting the assets of the city, is both physical and financial. As you carry through your plan, you have an oversight role, something that I know from seeing a report that Haley provides you on a regular basis, showing what's the progress we're making in accomplishing the goals we have set for the city. That's that oversight role. And finally, there's that advisory role. There is an informal aspect to it where you advise the manager and advise the staff, maybe informally saying, you know, I think we're a little bit off track here. Maybe we need to rein this in, or here's some ideas that I have. Before you really get to that some of those more formal roles. Well, your city manager and the council manager of government has some roles as well. And critical to this is that policy implementation role. I apologize, this is a little bit small here, but I'll just focus on a couple of these. Some of these are obvious: budgeting and purchasing and personnel and those kinds of things. But the policy implementation, that strategic plan, when it's adopted and when goals are set, then it's the city manager's responsibility to make sure it's being carried into action. I'll go to the final role here. It's advising council. Part of her participation today, and as you go forward here, is to make recommendations to you as elected officials, saying, here's where I think we ought to go. Now, it's up to you to decide whether or not you agree with that, but she has an obligation to make sure that she's providing that information to you. So you can see the back and forth here. Council advises the manager and staff. Manager and staff advise the council. That's the dynamic in a council manager form of government, where we're all on the same team to get the job done that we need to get to. So that's the next principle. This first principle here on this list, as you look at what makes for productive council manager relations, you're on the same team. You are playing different positions on that team, but you're all on the same team. Council speaks with a single voice. When it's directing the staff, you come together here in formal meetings, you're taking actions as a group, and whatever the majority of you decide you want to do, that's what is the direction that's given to the staff. Council directs the staff through the manager. You're not individually giving orders to the public works director or the other officials you have here. That all kind of channels through the manager so that there is that coordination. Everybody can get to know they're on the same page. The manager has an obligation to make sure that all of you elected officials get all the same information all at the same time in the same way, so that there is that openness and transparency among yourselves as to how this stuff gets done. And then finally, this is one that I think is so important these days, and that is we treat one another civilly. This is a big thing for me. It has been for me, especially over the last few years, as we have seen the deterioration of civility in our society generally. I hope that we can be examples at the local level of how we can deal with difficult issues in our communities and do it with respect for our fellow citizens. So, all right, heard my speech. When I do orientations, and just to refresh your memory, I've been a city manager for more than 40 years. I'm doing interim management right now. One of the things that I do is to help council members be effective in their job. I think there are 4 key aspects of that I share with new council members when they're first coming on to city council. Sort of recently in the village of Dundee as interim manager, and I was there during the November election. Had 4 new council members come on. I meet with individually with each one of them, and this is a part of what I shared with them in terms of how can they be effective in their journey on the council. You stay informed. That means that you're reading the materials that are coming to you from staff, that you're paying attention to what's going on in the community, because you're useful then to the organization by bringing that sentiment back to the group here as you're talking about the issues you face. You're sharing your knowledge, ideas, opinions. All of those are valuable. And you come in to have your meetings here, and especially today, what you know is important as we move this organization forward. You're working toward consensus. This is sometimes a hard lesson for some council members to learn, is that just having a good idea isn't enough. You have to convince your fellow council members that it's a good idea and something that should be acted on. And you do that through both formal and informal interactions with them, building up that sense that we're on the same page here. We want to move in the same direction for achieving consensus. And then importantly, especially for today, you stay focused on the big picture. What's the goal we're heading to? What's that destination we're trying to achieve? It's very easy to get lost as council members in particular in kind of the minutia of the budget, or the wording of an individual policy or an ordinance or whatever it might be, and lose track of where this is all heading for you. And so I encourage you, especially to keep your eyes out there in the distance. You're going to have to do some things, on a more immediate level as well, but stay focused on what the big picture is, where you're heading. Don't let yourself get distracted and shoved off course by some minor thing that comes up. I have currently serving as interim in the village of Lake Odessa. One of the issues that is of concern in the community right now that a council member was talking to me about was whether they should permit, as they call UTVs, these ATV type vehicles on village streets. They already allow golf carts there. And she was talking about how concerning it was to people in the community. And I said, if this is the worst problem you have, things aren't going too bad. That's what we need to focus on. There is that tendency and I'm sure your council meetings are much like other council meetings I've attended. There's some citizens coming up here. And that's the most important issue to them. Whatever it is that they're raising with you, that's the most important thing to them. And it is important to them. And I think it's important to deal with it. The challenge for all of you is not let that distract you from getting to the bigger goals that you really want to achieve. And so you have to learn that balance here, and you do that by staying focused on the big picture. One of the things that I will encourage you to do, get through this session and you develop some strategies is to revisit those really regularly. And I mean, the more often than quarterly, it's maybe something you want to visit once a month, or maybe it's something that's published on the backside of your agenda to remind yourself, this is what this all relates to. This is where this is all related. All right, let me stop there and see, since I've done all the talking here real quickly for just a couple of minutes. Any comments or observations or thoughts or questions that any of you might have? This is, again, just kind of laying some of that initial groundwork for you, but I want to make sure that if there's somebody who wants to make an observation here, you're welcome to do that. Otherwise, I'll move on. Yes, ma'am.
This PowerPoint going to be available to us?
I can make that, absolutely. And actually, this particular portion of it, I will tell you, is part of a somewhat longer presentation that I put together. There's another hat that I wear, which is I am a senior advisor to the State Association of City Managers, and I'm appointed actually by our International Association as well as senior advisor. So I was recently invited to do a presentation to the city of Grosse Pointe Park. I think it's that Grosse Pointe Park. Or they had a lot of new council members, and they wanted me to come in and talk about council manager government. So that actually, if you have an interest in that now or sometime in the future, that's actually free to you. I do that as this is a part of it, but there was a bit more, and there was more to that as well. And I think we spent a couple of hours going through a presentation that had some exercises to try and train folks to do that. I will certainly make a whole of this PowerPoint available to you. But if there should be an interest, Madam Mayor or council members, in my coming back and doing something a bit more in depth to as a part of a council training, Haley knows how to get a hold of me, and I'm happy to do that. And as I say, there's no charge at all to you for that. All right. Let's talk. One of the things that I did in preparation for today is look over a couple of documents that were put on. One is your current master plan that was recently updated and adopted by you, I believe, last fall. And then I also looked at the report that she prepares for you of her progress in meeting the goals you established for 2022. What I wanted to do there was use that to identify some of the themes that I see in those documents. Now, another person looking at those might come up with some different ideas. And I think some of the objectives were highlighted in the earlier presentation here. But so this is my interpretation. What I tried to do was to kind of summarize what I was seeing. So I identified 5 key themes that I saw that reflected in those 2 documents. And the first one is that there is an interest in ensuring that the community is meeting residents' basic needs. There is clearly, especially identified in your master plan, some challenges here from an income and employment standpoint for your residents. But one of the things that came through from your documents was that you're very concerned about making sure that all of it, with an equity approach here for your organization and for the community, making sure that residents' basic needs are being addressed. A second theme that I saw was an interest in strengthening neighborhoods and increasing housing quality and options. The housing quality and options thing is something that's appearing, I think, more and more these days. And you're seeing, as you did in your master plan discussion, about the missing middle housing, for example, providing a much greater range of housing opportunities for your residents, but especially strengthening neighborhoods by dealing with neighborhood blight and other kinds of factors that might make that, if addressed, would make your all of your neighborhoods stronger. There is a clear sense that the city is interested in improving on the quality of municipal services and overall the quality of life then that are provided to residents as a result of the services that you're providing. A fourth key theme that comes out is you're interested in enhancing key street corridors and then expanding modes of transportation. There's clearly an image that you're trying to convey here, and through specific kinds of projects on your major corridors, but then also recognizing that people have an interest in using more than one form of transportation to navigate around the city and are likely to do that more and more as time goes by. So whether it's pedestrian ways or bicycle lanes or those kinds of things, or public transit, expanding public transit options, all of those are seen by you, your documents. And by the way, this is by no means in any order of importance here. I think all of these are of the same level of importance to you, but addressing economic disadvantage in areas such as employment and income, as I've said. I think that those clearly are things that you've identified as key items. So that's just by way of background. Now, we want to begin process of developing the strategic agenda. We're going to skip the sections. I'm going to skip here. We'll make it back to it a little bit later, but I want to get into talking about milestones. And again, keep in mind this image that I have that we're on a journey here. So if you're out walking or traveling, there's a milestone. A milestone will tell you two things. It'll tell you how far you've come from where you started. It'll tell you how far you have to go to your destination. This is the part where you folks are going to start talking. And I'm going to start making some notes here. So give me just a second to pull up this part of what I need to be able to take notes on. In an ideal situation, these notes are available to you to see as I'm taking them. And unfortunately, this isn't an ideal situation. I don't have the ability to easily do that. So be thinking about the kinds of things that are identified here. The first two things we're going to do are sort of laying the groundwork. They're going to be describing where we are today, what's gotten us to this point. This is our starting point. So this is where you get to hear your voices and less of mine. But I want you to address for me just the next few minutes what events or circumstances, these can be positive or negative, have contributed in a significant way to making Albion what it is today.
Greg, and I want to make sure that department heads, they're able to participate in this conversation as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when you're answering this question and any question, but especially this question, I think that what you want to have in mind is there are things that you might personally have experienced or that you might have heard about that relates to the community. And so, and this could go back in recent past, it could be back further, but most of the time what I've observed in communities is that there are people who oftentimes have heard a story at a coffee shop or heard a story at church or whatever it is, and it gets repeated over and over and over again saying, yeah, this really was a serious problem. It's why we're like we are today, or this is a great thing, and that's where we're going. So Kaylee, again, you had a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the city of Albion, we are a post-industrial community. In fact, I want to say early 2000s, a lot of our industrial companies closed. And as a result, I know just city staff, we have drastically decreased. We had well over 100 employees. Now we are down to about half of that, 54, I believe. However, the size of our city has not changed. We're still expected to provide the same level of service when we had twice the number of employees to carry out the work that we do. And as a result of closing businesses, unfortunately results into a decrease in population. Our population has continued to decrease. And now a lot of that burden of, property taxes, whatever, our road millage or any other millages that we may have in place kind of fall on now a smaller group of residents to provide revenues to carry out the services that we're required to provide to our community.
And as a domino effect of those large industries closing, we lost folks who had to leave and find other employment. So our population did decrease in about 20 some years. So that's really not that long ago. So we're still dealing with the ramifications of the tax base law. So along with the losing population, we lost our main hospital, our primary health care, our public schools closed. So it was a domino effect And really, it wasn't that long ago, maybe like 15 years, if you drove downtown Albion, it looked vastly different than what it does now. So we're slowly starting to rebuild.
Yes.
I would also say the work of a select few business owners starting in about, and the college starting in 2000. That really saw a renaissance of what downtown is. So you start with Kids and Stuff Children's Museum in 2002, 2003. You do the Bone Theater in 2004, 5, 10. You look at the hotel, you look at the Foundry Bakehouse and Deli, and now the apartment rebuilding on the 400 block, the Malibu Brewing Company, and businesses returning to those spaces because we have a few business leaders in the college bringing resources to bear on in terms of a long term. You know, these are businesses that are not making money now and will continue to struggle financially without being underwritten by a few people with resources to help bring about that positive change. So, but we have lost almost 3,000 people in 20 years. And so, and the college has continued to, you know, in 2004, there were 2,000 college students at the college, and now there's maybe 1,400. And so it continues to be up and down in terms of population.
To piggyback off of what Mr. French was saying, we had the positive is the development that we had. The negative is the perception of the development that we had. So leaning more towards what people would consider gentrification, which may not necessarily meet the dynamics for gentrification, but that's the perception and that's the negative side of it. Also, we faced annexation of the school system. That affected our desirability as a city as well, being that we don't have necessarily a healthy, thriving school system here.
If I may follow up, Mr. Williams, on that comment. How are you seeing that reflected in terms of people, or are you seeing it reflected kind of part of people who might be thinking of Albion as a choice where they would push you aside if they're moving from someplace else? Do you have anecdotal evidence that stories you've heard that people find out, oh, wait a minute, my children aren't going to be going to school here? Are you hearing those kinds of stories that people are making residential choices based on where they're, you know, based on the fact that they don't have the same school system here that other communities might?
Right. Yeah, it presents itself. I know in the hiring process, I hear that quite a bit. Our main employer here is Albion College, and the thing that they have to contend with is wanting those employees to come here and live here, but not necessarily having a adequate school system here. In the terms of the traditional sense of the school systems, right? So they're contending with that and the fallout of that.
Thank you.
School of choice, pretty much killed out.
Yes.
Absolutely.
One other comment on that, in terms of the school system, schools of choice really did kill us. But before schools of choice, the perception, I think the perception and interpretation, what was happening in the schools, parents chose to move their children elsewhere. And so I think perception, having a positive perception is a big challenge for Albion, even in Calhoun County. Albion is usually the stepchild of whatever goes on in the county. So if we're not at the table, we basically lose out.
Just out of curiosity,
Well said.
you talk about the perception, what were some of the things that people were identifying, the negative perceptions? Can you be a little bit more specific? I mean, was it discipline related or safety or?
All of the above.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a former faculty member moving to Albion, we saw an opportunity to raise our children in the city of Albion, not because of its academic excellence, but because of its representation of society writ large. Our children are much more able to live in a diverse community, to engage with people of all backgrounds, and to be open and honest. They understand their own personal biases. They work very hard to be cognizant of that and to respect others and their difference and the differences that exist. And so while we wouldn't trade our kids' experience growing up in Albion and going to public schools, it did limit their opportunities once they left high school. I mean, my son had tremendous difficulty in college just because he wasn't academically prepared for it. But at the same time, his advocacy, sense of social justice and advocacy in any community he's lived in has been, through the roof and inspiring. So, okay.
Yeah, most of the schools it impacted our ability to develop future leaders. So ourselves searching for the youth in different school systems. Councilman Williams and I, we participate in the general first grade program. And when I was growing up, it was easy to understand where the programs were at. Development would be those programs. Even things like junior achievement or inroads, when you're trying to connect with youth and you're trying to search for them because they're all displaced, I think losing the school system. So we're trying to bring that back in and centralize development. But it's going to challenge. But you can't have.
Right.
Thank you.
And I will say that one of the good things about all the loss is that the growth of grassroots organizations like 4-H, even though that's been in place before, but other nonprofits, other, concerned citizens have created groups to try to meet the needs. And many of them have, been going strong for several years. So that was a good thing that kind of came out of the loss.
Right.
And Albion had all of those things all along. We're the only district that has Albion College, KCC, JCC right down the road, Calhoun Intermediate School. So we had the big picture, but unfortunately we weren't able to follow it through or describe it in a positive manner so people would stay and deal with the problems rather than running away.
Another number that might help, in 1997, when I moved to Albion, 75 or 80% of the faculty lived within the city postcode. That number is about 12% now. So most faculty, in fact, do not. And it's generational, right? So the young faculty might live here for a couple of years and then move away when they have children.
That's true with the school system also.
Yeah.
The Harrington School, maybe 10% live in the city. Everyone else drive in, do their job and drive out.
Right.
Makes a difference.
The housing also contributes to that as well, being that we don't have. Excuse me. The housing also plays a part in that as well, being that we have such a housing need. You really can't find necessarily adequate housing at different affordability levels. So at those different price points, the professors at the college may be able to afford something that the teachers at the elementary school can't. So, it's at varying levels. And that's something that we have to work on, and something that the EDC director also addressed. But I would also like to mention that we also have a certain perception when it comes to business and doing business in the city. The thought from a lot of the entrepreneurs of color is that the city helps certain entrepreneurs develop and do different things in the city. Now, personally, I would like to say that I haven't seen that to be true, but that's the perception.
So
Councilwoman Reed, did you have your hand up?
No, I didn't.
Councilman Lawler?
Lawler did.
Thank you so much. One of the things that it is a milestone for me is partnership. Sitting here listening to all the things that help Albion through its tough times. We came back with people coming together, which partnerships is very important to me. Collaborating with Land Bank to help get rid of sore eyes or to help a parcel next to a homeowner. Combine that together. KCC, JCC, Opportunity School, they all collaborate together for workforce development. So it's a lot of positive things that's being discussed right now that I see would not be happening if it wasn't for partnerships. So partnerships is one of the things that I ran off of for my 2020 to 2024, and I am looking forward to pursuing partnerships to get things done in Albion to make it more thriving than it already is.
I would say one last challenge, the properties that were once owned by the large industries, those are ideal places for housing, but we have to deal with contaminated soil before we can build. So we have a lot of property within the community. We just need to address the remediation of the soil in order to build, which we all know costs a lot of money.
Yes.
The perception that I continue to hear often is that there's no reason to be in Albion because their jobs are elsewhere, their children have to go to other schools. So a lot of people are still thinking about getting up and leaving. The other thing I hear about different, big companies coming here is that they say it's just so hard to get a building here. It's hard to start up on ground. It's always a block, or they can get so far into it and then they can't continue. There's always a roadblock. And that's just not on small things. That's not a big thing. So there's people that are trying to build here. There's people that are trying to come up and come in Albion, but they get these roadblocks. There are people that do want to stay here, and there are some that would love to come back because of the town, how it was. I wouldn't even say 15 years ago, because my kids would be that, but even further than that, when we had some of everything here for our kids. And then also the daycares, you hear that as well.
Yeah.
They cannot get any daycares here. So I'm saying, I hear everybody, and like you said, everybody's, there's nothing wrong with it, but there are so many things that are yet when you can just go to a small place, an entity that you hear so much of the conception of why they want to leave and not stay here, and to coming together and the partnership. You hear that in so many places that we as a council have to always be the ones to stand up and say, okay, not so. What did you hear? Where did it come from? And bring it back to the table. And as we continue to go forward, if we continue to have the transparency and let one another know that we're here for the big picture and not for the small things, I believe that we can reconcile some of these things, but maybe not all of them.
I think we've been in survival mode since we've had the loss of all of our major businesses to decrease in population. And just, I'm thinking on like the day-to-day operations side, in the last 5 years, we've had how many managers, in permanent managers, interim managers, and that not only affects working with council, moving big projects forward, but it also affects the individual departments and their ability to carry out or move, accomplish goals that have been set for them. As you know, when a new manager comes in, there's always different styles on how they would like to get done. It takes them time to build the relationship with the council, their staff, and the community. And when it's kind of been just a constant revolving of who fills this position, it's a domino effect, and it affects a lot more than what we think. I'm almost completing year 2, and I feel like I finally got my feet underneath me to where we are able to start moving projects forward. I'm being very fortunate with the council and the staff that we have accomplished a lot here in the past 2 years, but it definitely takes some time to move forward. And I know that the staff, more importantly, they feel that more so than I know the community does, but the individuals who are responsible for carrying out to accomplish these tasks, they feel it, I think, most. And I don't want to speak for my department heads, but I know when we do meet, I think we're looking just to get some stability and just being a community that's been in survival mode. When I talk, I think we have a bunch of buckets that we unfortunately we've kicked down the road from the condition of our streets, the infrastructure that we have built here. It was built to support a lot of those large manufacturers. It's still here. It hasn't gone anywhere. So we're still expected to maintain and to make improvements, but it's just been hard when you're trying to just keep the day-to-day operations going to really focus on those long-term projects. So I think if survival mode is what we've been in, and I'm hoping we have started to build some sense of stability to where we can start accomplishing those major, addressing those major issues that are priorities in our community.
Okay. Any other, yes, over here and then over again?
Okay. In 2010, I was on a group with a group that was trying to refer to Albion as a retirement destination. And I told them I did not want to be part of the retirement destination. But I think the problem now is that we have a lot of different groups that's working with kids, but we are not really moving our children forward like they need to be. I think we've got to do a whole lot more to get the kids going if we plan on building up Albion, because we're going to be a retirement destination, because as they come along, if there's nothing here offered to them to keep them here, they're going to move on someplace else. And that's what's been happening for years. We've lost a lot of good kids. A lot of kids that came from good families, that came from good backgrounds and everything, because the city had nothing to offer them to keep them here. So I think if we're going to really try to make Albion move forward and be the city that it's going to be, we're going to have to definitely get some good things started for kids, not always playing basketball, not always different things that are having fun, but some good work ethics, some good projects going where they have to learn how to plan and do. And right now, I don't see us as doing it.
Okay.
And
if I may jump in real quickly, hang on to that thought, because we're going to get into the next section here in a little bit. So we're going to talk about big ideas. So like you and others, as you're thinking about some of these, and some of you have talked about some ideas, bring back those big ideas. And so I'm using this as an example, and I'm not being critical. I certainly made a note of your observation, because I think it's important to what we're talking about here. But you have done what I expect to have happen here, which is you've thought beyond the problem to think about what are things we can do to try and address that. So this is one of these points at which, when we come back and start talking big ideas, think about what do we need to do here that reverses that trend. And so I want you to hang on to that idea. So I think Ian, you were going to be next.
Yeah, so having not lived through in Albion in any of these three periods, just going back through when the planning department of the city was able to do residential community development block grants for residential improvement, the 70s, the 90s, and kind of the late aughts, early 20s there. So we have a lot of records of community development block grants for residential projects. We're doing some now, but this was half dozen or more every year of real residential windows in people's houses, porches on people's houses with money from outside of the community. So I tracked the 70s, 90s, and end of the aughts as times when at least the planning department of the city was staffed and able to provide those services.
I think it's important that we celebrate our wins, because so as we look to stabilize the ship, I think that we all heard the theme of negative perception. So how do we counter that? And that's what good marketing and branding, putting out our confidence to the public as we make strides to stabilize the ship. So I think that brand marketing campaign, so a lot of the things happening now.
Right, another idea to hang on to. I appreciate your comments. What interests me about these comments is that your focus is fairly recent. This is stuff that's happened to you, not in the distant past, but in a relatively recent past. Might reflect some trends that have been going on here for a while. But you're dealing with something like the change has been rapid, and it seems to me that you're still figuring out how to adapt to some of those changes. I want to keep us moving along here. The next thing I want to do is talk about trends. So when we talked about the milestone, got a picture of where we are, what we've been dealing with, how we got to where we are today. We talk about trends, what are the things that are influencing the environment in which we work? They can be local, they can be statewide, they could be national or international. They could be economic, social, demographic, technological. When you think about the kinds of things that are going to affect you from the outside, in addition to dealing with the issues identified here, what are the other things that are going on here that you do that you would say are ones that you need as an organization to be paying attention to going forward here, so that you're making sure that you're recognizing that other things can influence. Yep.
So in 1974-ish, we had a Corning glass plant that made every single picture tube for every black and white television set ever sold in America.
Mhm.
And when Nixon signed the agreement with China, that factory closed. Recently, our political leaders have now made a call for a return of manufacturing to America. Both previous president and the current president are talking about, the CHIP Act and bringing other manufacturers. It's auto parts. We used to have auto parts manufacturers here. They're moving. The idea is to bring those manufacturing back to America. And I think we as a community, having had a tremendous history in the auto industry, making parts at foundries and plants all over the city, we need to be on top of that, so that as those opportunities come back to Michigan, come back to America, we can be involved in providing sites for those, et cetera. So I think a return of manufacturing to America, as called out by our national leaders, I think is going to be helpful for us as we move forward, if we're successful.
Do I recall from Haley, from the documents that you sent me, that you are an RRC community?
Correct.
So I think you've got sites that you've identified that are going to be marketed. So, all right, so you've already taken one step that's going to be helpful on all the things that go along with that as well. So good for you. Yes.
Okay, to piggyback off of what Councilman French was saying, we definitely were impacted negatively by a lot of trade policy. We could possibly position ourselves moving forward to be in a great position. But on the economic side, we have been hit by COVID, of course, but a lot of the economic downturns have affected us greatly, being that we never recovered from the early 2000s, and position ourselves to be able to do so. Technology is something that we've been limited in being able to access, because we don't necessarily have the school system that we can teach our kids to STEM and different things that would put them at the forefront of being able to get these entry-level positions that are high-paying positions that you don't necessarily have to go to school for. You can just do a boot camp or something like that in order to be able to walk directly into one of those places and get a high-paying job and still work remotely from the city of Albion. We're also limited in high-speed internet. Our broadband capacity isn't necessarily at the level of some of the larger communities, but I think communities throughout the country are facing those issues.
Other trends that are of interest to you, I think it can be positive too. There may be some things that are going on that you say, you know what, because of this, Albion's perfectly positioned. So
Yes, one trend I think of, I guess, stems from social trends. Albion is almost the sickest community in Calhoun County in terms of high blood pressure, heart rates, sedentary lifestyle, diabetes, obesity. So some of the social trends, as we are planning, we have to include our health, because our health is far below Calhoun County average as well as state average.
Well, and you can piggyback onto that the level of poverty in
Yes.
Albion is larger than any other community in the county.
And I was going to say, that's kind of both a positive and a negative. Obviously, negative being that I think our poverty rate is 32% in our community. A positive on that, it does make us eligible for a lot of the grant programs and funding out to help us accomplish different projects or different goals, but really being able to address and decrease that number of people living in poverty is definitely a priority.
And I guess.
Yeah, Virgin,
Oh, I was gonna-
sorry.
I was gonna say, when it does come to housing, because I do know that I have friends and folks that have looked to find other locations to live, but given the surrounding area, they look at Marshall, they look at Jackson, they look at Lansing, our housing is still more affordable than any of those other communities. Our tax base is much lower. So when people are putting everything together and for a family budget, they're like, it makes sense to stay. Because, you know, I may commute, but I'm still getting more bang for my buck from my house here in Albion than if I were to try to relocate.
And to piggyback on that, maybe it's my generation, but I bought a house that needed a lot of renovation. And I learned how to do renovation. So that's what I did. I look at my children who are in their late 20s, and they're not interested in buying a house that requires renovation. And so a lot of our properties need significant restoration, renovation, and younger folks are not able or interested in doing that without paying an outside firm, right? So we did all that stuff as much as we could ourselves, which made it more affordable. But that social trend is that people tend to not be, you know, I watch it on TikTok, but they won't buy it themselves, right?
Yeah, I think it's the know-how, and you probably.
Well, I didn't. Seriously, in 1987, I could pound a nail. I did Appalachia Service Project one summer. That was it. But
They're not gonna try it.
and we started in the second story. So if I made a mistake, no one would see it except us. And like I fix it, you know, how many layers of drywall compound in my upstairs hallway? But
And then next.
He has done it in every place he's ever lived. It's a never ending list of projects he's been involved in, so.
And Virgie wanted to make.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so, I'll speak a little bit technical and, so let me speak to this slide from a broader perspective. Albion is a microcosm of Michigan. Michigan is a microcosm of the nation. Michigan has for several years in a row lost more people than it has gained statewide, meaning more people have died or left the state than have been born and or returned to the state. So the trend is that we are gaining talent. We're not gaining new interest, and so one of the that then plays into why the poverty level is where it is. The folks that had the ability to keep it elsewhere are elsewhere. Unless you have a passion to stay, like us, right, or come back. It's hard to stay here and with the lack of opportunity. So, and that is again breaks the same way. Grand Rapids somewhere some of the same thing. So again, from an economic trend perspective, our demographics has shifted, and so that leaves us in a higher situation. Politically, we see the governor making a play to move the Democratic beginning of the what's the word for the launch of the forward, right, and try to take over Hampshire, right? So there's a lot of push right now, and Michigan is seen as even more than past history, it's even a swing state. See, and now it's being seen as a leader state. So I want to move into the solution. I guess the opportunity is that the opportunity is politically, we are in a place to influence that. So rather than just be responsive to, we have a governor who is speaking out and saying, we want to influence that forward thinking. So the trending is that, and the technological trend, let's be honest, how many, this is a great in-person meeting, and all of us know we have very few. And the lack of technology availability to those who don't have the ability to get connected, that's a challenge. So, so again, I'm trying to step back a little bit and say, Albion is a perfect place to solve some of these problems and create, secondary manufacturing. But the challenge is here is exactly even more than maintaining a larger human population. And I think the other trend is that if we do increase the quality of housing and the availability of housing, our taxes, quite frankly, could go up from a assessed value perspective. It also could go down because we're sharing services in a wrong way. So that is going to be a really tough conversation. So those are the trends that come to the negative side.
Got a couple hands over. I'm not sure which of you had their hand up first, but.
Okay, you taught school for 38 years and I heard several principals say squeaky wheel gets the oil. So I'm back to the fact that if Albion wants to grow, if we want to let people know what we have here, like we have land, we have the need for housing and stuff like that, the best way to do it is to start hitting on folks' nerves in Lansing. And once you start inviting them in and say, come see what we have here. We used to have people, I'm trying to think of her name, quite a while ago. She was one of the representatives from Lansing, but she would always get people from Lansing to come down.
Kate
Siegel.
Siegel.
Down to Elba. And so if we, and I can remember years ago when I first got on council, we used to go up to Lansing. They had different meetings set up there about communities and how to move your community forward. And we used to go up to Lansing and start letting them know what we have here to offer people and what they can do to help us get people here to use it.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. So I wanted to speak to the trend of economic. We have CBDG grants coming through, which is a big help for Albion. A thing that kind of bothers me a little bit is the long brownfield agreements. I'd like to see more shared agreements so that you pay something. And I'd like to see more understanding between the developer and the EDC and the city, because when a developer does come in, I mean, look what we have. We really don't have, you know, the money to just say, you know, you tax free for 15, 17 years, you know, and that kind of affects us when we're doing our DDA suffers, our streets suffer. So I'd like to see more shared agreements, pay something, because we are struggling. You know, we do recognize that we do have to do these brownfield agreements, but they don't have to be that long, because we are suffering.
Sure.
This is my first time to be there, but speaking of strength. Here, that's why I hear that, okay, what can we get? How we process the service of schooling, healthcare, jobs, okay, look at it that way, we literally want to maintain the people. And or people here, right? I moved to Minnesota a couple of years ago, and the first thing we find child mom before we did look at the school systems, you look at nightlife, look at access to certain areas, and in Albion, what you have for the same parents, this kids can't talk about themselves, what do you mean, saying no parents? I'll have the option to go this, the brewery or to the bar or whatever, but what are we doing to keep our parents here in order to keep our kids got they look at that. The strengths, I'm on social media, and I see they follow this person. That's much more. Also, they where most of the community. All out of trial there. I'm just gonna finish a little bit, but if people can go here, we have that here. Then people will do. You gotta talk about what kind of city you wanna be. You wanna be traditional, conservative, or you wanna be progressive and still have some conservative way of tradition. Or we can still bring those technical out of the advancing here. Where do we have to create? Don't have that created. So we gotta look at that and see what's out of the city we want to be, and then.
All right. I'm gonna bring this part of the conversation to a close. And I appreciate these last two sections, all the contributions you had. I think that there are clearly some challenges that you see that you have been facing, will continue to face. You know, what we want to do is to move from that point of view. How are we going to reverse the trends that we've had and address the trends that from the outside that are affecting us? I think we've had a number of areas that people are have been giving some comments and suggestions about. Now is the time here today where to start working on those things. So what the next portion of this is going to ask you to come up with big ideas. And when I think about big ideas, I think about those that can lead to significant change. I'd like you to have your perspective. If you're going to be dealing with developing a strategic agenda for the next year, maybe the next few years. But when we think of big ideas, think about opportunities for change, we need to have that longer view. So look out 10 or 15 or 20 years, say, what could be different about Albion? And how would we get to that point? That's what I mean by big ideas. There is a method, I guess, that I have adopted called IDEA, which is imagine, design, equip, and act. Those are the 4 stages of getting from a big idea to the end result that you're trying to achieve. Now, we don't have enough time today to go through all 4 of those things that we're doing. I would like you to focus on the imagine part here. And with imagination, I want you to ask, well, there's one thing here in terms of big ideas. If you're going fishing, use a big hook. The whole idea is that when you go fishing, use a little fish, you're going to catch a little fish. So if you want to catch big fish, you use a big hook. I didn't invent this. I can't find where this quote came from, and I have searched. It's not mine. I'm not claiming credit, but it exactly illustrates what I want you to be thinking about here, which is go for the big fish, have big ideas, and eventually, that's not there. Must have left out a slide here. All right. So here's one of the ways you start with big ideas. You start with imagination, and that is you start with what if. What if family formation persons come and reside in Albion? And when you ask those what ifs, or what if this was a town that was characterized by a significantly lower poverty rate than we have today. So and these things are all implicit in what you've already been saying. I want you to articulate that by coming up with these what if statements, by coming up with the big ideas, not letting what you have identified as your past dictate your future. Talked about a lot of things. When you talk about going on a journey, you're going to face 2 different things. You're going to face obstacles in the path, and you're going to also come to bridges. And a lot of times, things we see as obstacles can be transformed into bridges. What I want you to do is to not be challenged by obstacles, But to recognize there are ways to overcome those obstacles. And a part of that starts with the guy. Okay, so what I'd like, this is a point which we're going to ask for the room to kind of split in half. So we'll take this half and kind of divide up the staff and the folks here and head into the other room. I am going to give you just 15 minutes. I want you to come back with the 5 best big ideas you come up with. So Jay is going to go in the other room, but you're going to do the work. So the whole idea here is start taking some notes, start coming up, talk amongst yourselves. We're not here to do the talking. Okay? We're not here to do the talking. There are note cards in there. There are pencils in there. Go ahead and have some conversation among yourself. And at 1 or 2, you're going to be coming knocking on the door, and we're going to wrap that up and then come back together and share what we come up with.
Mayor, where you going?
Because
Right in the middle.
we're gonna leave you when she's the mayor.
In the middle.
She's gonna stay in her seat.
All right.
If you need some note cards or the stream along here, Mr. Attorney, you are welcome to join in here as well.
Yeah, let's put them to work. Mr. Attorney.
Sit up here, may they do that as well?
Ian and Scott.
Ian, you want to come up and join around the. 3 of you are welcome to come up here and. I'll do it. You go downstairs, on the stairs.
Okay.
Oh, there's one here too. Anybody?
They are, that's where the food is. Yeah.
Instructions here, you just do the documents yourself, and think big, think
Big, big.
Okay, big ideas. Big ideas. I think something that I would like to see here in the city. Now, this is crazy. This is crazy. But if we had a hospital here that also functioned as jointly as a STEM high school. So there was some overlap there, right? So that we can start to push our kids, well, the school system aligned with the hospital, so that we can start to direct our kids down that path from an earlier age and expose them to science, technology, engineering, and math, right? So you have at a hospital, you have every one of those things that takes place. You got the engineering in the development of the building, also the operations of the building, making sure that the water and the boiler system and all of these things function the way that they're supposed to. But you also have the science in the actual the dynamic of working with patients and all of that. And then you also have the technology, because it's all based off of technology. You go to the doctor office now and they're operating off a pad, or they roll in a screen and they're doing everything off of a screen. You have the security portion of the technology. So I think having overlap in that way, and if we can't directly influence in that way right out the gate, maybe we do something as far as like a veterinary clinic that kind of overlaps, because we do have the equestrian center here. And I'm pretty sure that people that have farms and different things that live close by would love to have a place where they can take their horse if it has an issue, and they can get it treated, and get it back in good health. And the veterinarians have to attend just as much college as regular doctors, human doctors, but also a additional component of being able to work on work on like it's a car, but being able to treat animals. So I think it's a crazy idea, but I think it would be a beautiful thing if we could do something like that here in the middle of the lower portion of Michigan.
Well, I just want to say that I don't think that's too ridiculous because we're pretty close to MSU. We're pretty close to Grand Rapids where
Not too
like
far.
human healthcare and animal healthcare happen in the state. Grand Rapids, Ann Arbor, Lansing. I mean, so I think when you go back to what Greg was talking about with the barriers, right? Imagining the barriers don't exist to that. So we need population that can support the infrastructure so that we're going to be an attractive place for programs like that to settle. We're not going to have a problem for a while of our property values being, you know, themselves being a barrier for that coming here. So if someone had the staff, if they could promise the staff the housing and the resources in the community to do that, you know, there is room in Albion for that idea.
Let me suggest that the discussion along here, thank you for comments, Ian. But in order to make sure we get as many ideas out on the table, I think before we try to move into the design aspect of it, I can do this to Ian and I know one another. We actually worked together at Earl State one year, volunteers. So he had to remind me, but I definitely remember it. So did you participate in the final thing at the end with the downtown show?
No, I was contracted elsewhere that day.
Anyway, other big ideas out there. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know why I'm stuck on economic, but anyway, my big idea is for our downtown. I've been thinking about it for a long time. The presidents of our EDC, I've talked to maybe 2 or 3 of them about downtown movement. I can see Albion having picnic tables on the side. I can see chefs with a big tall white hat twirling pizza dough. I can see that. I can see the different diversity in Albion enjoying some of the restaurants downtown. So when thinking about the economic development for our downtown, I see our Baum Theater as a family place. I see college functions with families coming to Albion. I see kids and stuff having people that visit here from the college or outside surrounding areas. They can do kids and stuff 0 to 12. I see a roller skating rink here for 13 and up for adults. So I'm just not sure how to capture all that. I have it in my mind, but I think partnerships is really going to play a big part in helping Albion rebuild itself. I think we have to share the wealth. Everybody has an idea about how to make Albion thrive, but the ideas are different. If we put our ideas together and be considerate of everyone's idea, I think that we can find some type of common ground so that we can get to the next thing.
Good. And if I may just rephrase what you're saying, it sounds like you want downtown to be recognized as a gathering place. That's where people are going to gather here. Downtown. That's what I'm hearing you say.
That's yeah, and like I said, this is we have stuff in Albion for families of all different ages to do. Just gotta do it.
Yes, sir.
You know, there was a great idea of a statement about the nightlife in Albion and what that, at least for me, sparked that. I think the city could use, I guess what I would describe as at least one or a couple of franchise restaurants. When I say franchise, I don't mean fast food. I mean popular restaurants where people can sit down and have a meal where adults would go. Something that you maybe, and ones that you're not going to find that already exist in Marshall, and ones that you're not going to find that already exist in Battle Creek. Because Albion has prime placement on 94 between Detroit and Chicago. And so having something like that would be a draw, not just for the residents and the surrounding communities, but people that are passing by, like, hey, there's a restaurant here where we can sit down and have dinner, not, drive through the drive-through and mow it down as we're driving in the cars. Something that will stay and maybe because they stay, they also traverse the downtown and visit other businesses. But
That's been a problem for as long as I've been in the city, because I remember when I started with the city in 2011, I remember asking somebody, where can I get a cup of coffee? And the only answer at the time was the gas station. Now there's a big, more franchises like that will draw other businesses and other people to the community.
I lived in the area in Hillsdale, and I remember that in the eighties, there was a very popular restaurant in downtown Albany that people drove from all over. I can't remember, maybe it was Cajun food, I can't remember for sure, and I don't recall the name of it, but that was Albion.
No, it was,
Devon's.
the place that was in, Ward, Arcadia.
That's, that was a place.
How long ago?
What was it called? Arcadia Fair. Remember, where Mary Ward's attorney's office was? That got bought to be a restaurant. So it was late 90s,
Oh, okay.
late 90s.
I was too young.
Right.
Okay. Well, just like you were talking about, there's vacant buildings and things here that nothing's being done for, like the restaurant up here, the Chinese restaurant, if they're not gonna fix it up, why shouldn't they? I mean, something needs to be done, because that is a nice area, a big area too, where you could have a really nice restaurant. And that could, and there's other places around Albion, up where Ponderosa used to be, and up in that area, out where they just tore down the what's the hot dog hamburger place. But anyway, my next one would be senior housing, because there's a lot of seniors who are leaving their housing, but they don't want to go to some place where there's nothing to do. And so I was looking at some places in Lansing and some places in Jackson that have things, and Battle Creek. We went and visited there with the land bank, and they have opportunities for the people to do things, even workshops where you can make stuff and different stuff. So that would be a good thing. You talk about entertainment, just like you said, we're right here in between a whole lot of cities. But there's things that you need in your city. But then you're close enough to run to Lansing, to Jackson. And since COVID is wrapping up, a lot of places there that was closed is going to start opening back up, which is going to make, places for entertainment close by. I look at that Dalrymple area where the arsenic is. That is a perfect place for low-income housing. And there's a daycare there and a whole bit. And I think that we need to have some more daycares that are, I wouldn't say child-friendly, because I believe it is child-friendly, but I would say that had more to offer. So.
Yes, sir.
All right, I got a few, riverfront development and gathering spaces. Youth sports complex / esport complex. Live music venues and / food and drink.
Growing up in the West, watching mining towns, logging towns go from boom to bust. Watching those towns reorganize economically, they advertise themselves very well along highway corridors. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of people traveling right near Albion every single day of the week. And in Montana, these towns were miles and miles apart. 2-3 miles before you approach that town is advertising itself to get you to get in there. I learned, for instance, when I moved here, T-ball began here. That could be an advertising possibility right there, where it all began, Albion, Michigan, T-ball.
We're working on that.
I'm just saying advertising this I-94 corridor could be of great economic benefit.
Other big ideas.
I'd love to see more regional transit. I mean, we are one of the few cities in Michigan that still has a train station. And that hasn't had that train station, you know, torn down into something else, a restaurant in most towns. We have a college, we have a train station. We want to connect to a bunch of cities that are around an hour away. I think there are some easy solutions to that if we're, again, assuming that the milestones of population and resources are accounted for. Those thousands of people that Kevin's talking about driving by, we only need 6,000 of them to decide to stay. That's not too many.
That's a small percentage of what comes by
Whoever was
today.
talking about the restaurant, you're right about that, because there's places where the restaurant is so. People brag about it so until you'll go there. And then when you go there, you'll shop in their town. But the thing about our town is, we don't have any places that have, I've been asking for a shoe store for years. And there's no shoe store, there's no clothing stores, there's no any of that, so. There's really no reason. I mean, if you're gonna go to buy your shoes in Jackson, you're gonna find a restaurant there to eat in too. Or if you're gonna go to Battle Creek to buy something, you're gonna find a restaurant or clothing stores or whatever you want there. So because Albion does not have downtown the things that people need, they go other places, and that's not helping us grow.
Yep, pre-K tutoring programs.
Pre-K.
Pre-K. So we get them as young as we possibly can to try to go over the things that, well, we know that their parents probably should be teaching them, but they don't necessarily know to teach them, right? So they learn to basically read, you know, before going into the kindergarten system. So, you know, pre-K.
Never been in a pre-K classroom.
No, I haven't.
Been in a pre-K classroom. Is that like, okay.
But that's why I say, tutor, you know, you get one of them, the guy.
Yes.
So it would. One idea would be to consider the target like a population of size. I think that would bring planning. So do we want to be 10,000? Do we want to be 20,000? What do we want our population and size to be? And that would help us. So if we, let's say we, I mean, I don't know the number, so I haven't heard any conversation on that. But I don't want to disturb my own thoughts, and I would be interested in knowing what the vision of folks would be. Is 20 too much, or is 20 the right number? I think I've seen in the history up to 15,000. So like we're half of what we were at one point. So and I would assume that, I'm presuming we want to increase the population because that creates all kinds of opportunities. Do we want
That's
to
the goal.
10? Do we want to be 20? Do we want, I don't know. Do you want to be more than that? I don't know. Do you want to? And are we considering the greater Albion? Like how far out into the county do you consider your? So anyway, I think it would be nice to have some insights as a new leader in the community. It'd be nice to have some insights as to the target goals of population.
So how many people we need to come back to help us fix our streets?
We need about 12.
But you know, if we clean up the areas like Dalrymple and on where the Malibu was, that would encourage.
Well, so again, I'm not, if I'm just visioning, what's the vision of what it looks like what does it look like 20 years from now? we now have 20,000 people. And we built a downtown and we built an uptown, so I call uptown where Burger King was, right? So we're gonna build an uptown, we're gonna build a downtown, or whatever the language there is. But can that be a big retail center, if it was a, big, whatever you decide. I'm still learning and listening, that if we're building to 20,000 people, then we know what we're shopping for as we're trying to attract this.
Grocery store. Yeah, another grocery store, definitely.
And we want to put it where the medical lot is, so we got to have that cleaned up in order to do that.
Yeah. That wouldn't be bad.
I mean, that's prime land.
It is.
It's
It wouldn't be bad.
land, and it's just sitting there growing trees and being nothing.
But it's also
Where,
contaminated
building-
land, so.
It's where
Yeah.
a company used to be that did metal and
CDBG
iron
funding.
and stuff like, and it's contaminated. And then you go over where Dalrymple School is, prime land,
Contaminated.
but it's contaminated. And I mean, how many, you could put businesses there, you could put houses there, you could put grocery stores there, you could put almost anything there, but you can't.
So
Right.
Keep in mind, contamination on a site is one of those things that we often think of as a barrier that actually can be a bridge word.
Yes,
You
yes.
probably talk to this and maybe others here in your organization, or that, and I know from my experience in Wasso, that sometimes we hope contamination on a site because it opened up our use of tools that were not otherwise available on a greenfield site. And so by taking advantage of the ability to, in some cases, obtain grants to assist with brownfield projects, but to capture taxes to be able to, from paid by that new industry that can go and reimburse them for whatever cleanup they need to do. And some contamination is stuff that, depending what you're gonna do on the site, you can leave it in place. And so, it's sometimes a difficult lesson for communities to understand, particularly those of you who don't work on this, you're not in this on a daily basis, but contamination is not always the negative you think it is. In some instances, it's definitely a problem, but in most of those instances, there's definitely assistance that eventually will come from the state and federal government to help clean it up. But in other cases, it's the kind of thing that can be managed and managed very effectively by capping the site or by removing some contaminants. But there are programs, and I can tell you from personal experience, having set up brownfield reimbursement programs for developers. We didn't have any city dollars in it. It was all their dollars that went into developing the site because of the location advantages of it. And basically, we had to wait to get the new taxes because they were all going back to reimburse them. But you got the jobs and you got the rest of it that came along with that. So.
And since Lansing is looking for places to put up buildings or have businesses, now is the time to just get on their nerves and well, not on their nerves, but have them come in and see what you have to offer.
Right, and I will tell you that. And myself in the back, and I heard taking my time doing it, but when I was in Wasso, the DEQ at that time, people now, DEQ at that time, started up a new program where they wanted to assist communities in redeveloping properties that had been formerly productive economic sites. At that time, and this would have gone back to the '90s, and we had prepared for not knowing that program is coming. We had more grants from the DEQ for that program than any other city in the state of Michigan. So if you're prepared and recognize those things as assets, and then tools can be taken care of. I need to be wrapping this up on big ideas here. So
I think she had
a lot of what we is because we've known for a long time that we need to do things. So we jump into that design and equip phase. And we haven't gotten a unified vision. So I would encourage. I absolutely agree. I can brownfield, develop, I can attract developers, I can do all that. That isn't, we're not now that thank God I had that experience. We can do all that, but we still need the vision of the community and to understand what they want where. So I still, as a new leader here in town, need more information on what each neighborhood has in mind. So I think we need to make sure we're getting input from the neighborhoods in these areas as to what that neighborhood wants. And then I can work all kinds of magic, but I don't wanna just start going, brownfield sites and putting whatever there, and say we did it, and it wasn't part of a neighborhood plan. I just, in my heart, I know as a developer that that could be a critical error.
Well, the good thing is you have council members who can tap into that. Council members who have direct contact and with the neighborhood, they can say that.
The meeting went to 3:30.
Yeah.
Let me try and think that. I think there are a few easier that are coming out, but part of it is to, redevelop sites that are currently underutilized, unused or underutilized. That's one of the themes that's coming out here. And so having, vital uses on some of these sites, there is certainly interest in Albion being a regional destination and developing in a way that allows that and promoting that and so forth. The suggestion from Mr. Williams to have a veterinary hospital that will attract, allow for sustaining a STEM school, and then some other things related to education, kind of that full range from pre-K, pre-K or pre-K up through the high school age, but looking at those kinds of things differently, I think that's certainly one area. I'm trying to summarize some of these things so we can come up with, kind of the biggest of the big ideas here and wrap as many of these things together as we can. And so much, the destination, the riverfront development, there's so many of them that fall under that particular thing. As we're coming back and reporting out, and I will let you do that to your peers here, then be thinking about, what are those kind of common themes that maybe wrap some of these things together so we can kind of come up with what the main ones are.
One last thing, is a senior health place, like for people who can't live at home anymore, they need some place to live and be taken care of, because Albion's population is old. And I know with some people that I know where the kids have got to either go to Battle Creek or, 20 to 30 miles to visit their parents. If that's an everyday thing, it's tiresome. So if you had something that was in the city to where you could go without having to do a lot of driving and stuff like that, especially with weather.
Okay.
Nursing homes.
So we're gonna group these together?
We'll let you kind of figure out how to do this. We'll see what happens when we get together with the rest of you.
Okay.
So maybe now.
Get a break, Ms. Mayor. Yeah. I'm sure. I think there's still plenty to do. How many minutes?
Earlier, it said 72. Wait, that's the right way. You turn it up or down. Quit talking here. When order.
Yes.
And maybe I'm.
Wait, is Pat planning on tack on time? Nah, we're already behind schedule.
No, we're gonna run short. There's no question about it. We will make good use. That's, we're talking, when you do these things, you have to improvise. The plans you had when you started are not necessarily the plans you go along here. So we're gonna still cover the main and important topics here for you, and get you where you need to go. We hope, but what we want to do next is to have some conversation back and forth. So we have two groups here. Now we need to have some report back, and we just want to alternate between the two groups as to what were some of the big ideas. And so, the whole idea is not to reiterate what took place, but we had some conversation about how to consolidate some of those things. So for anybody who's in this group, what we're trying to do now is share with the other people and try to make sure that we've got this to some kind of a manageable list, but we'll work with whatever we came up with here. So whoever with the council chambers group wants to go forward, go ahead and share.
Go ahead, David.
Okay, all right, so I'll give y'all the list that I had, hospital / STEM school system, riverfront development and gathering spaces.
Hold on, hang on.
What was that first one again?
Hospital.
Hospital / STEM school system.
Sims?
STEM.
Oh, STEM.
Science, technology, engineering, and math.
Mr. Williams, why don't you describe that just real briefly a little bit?
Okay, so if
I know what you're thinking of.
we know we need a hospital here, but what if we also utilize that hospital as a training ground for future doctors, right? So we incorporate STEM into the STEM school system into the hospital as well. So maybe a joint grounds or campus, right? Where we intentionally produce the staff that we need, you know what I mean? I think that's something that will be impactful here in our community. Want me to go to the next one?
Sure.
Okay, so I have riverfront development and gathering spaces. That kind of piggybacked off of what Marcola was saying about downtown gathering spaces and restaurants and different culinary experiences, more like a more cultural experience here in town. I think she's been watching Ratatouille. It's still a good idea.
To be my favorite.
Still a good idea. Still a good idea. A youth sports complex / esports complex. I know internet sports and gaming is taken over in a lot of ways, but it also exposes the kids to STEM as well. So I think that's something good. We mentioned a live music venue / food and drink. So you go out of town, you go watch a show, and you have a beverage. They have dining there as well, something like that. I know daycares were mentioned quite a bit, and just to piggyback off of the daycare, it was pre-K tutoring programs. So maybe there's a potential for some overlap there. The intent of that is to ensure that our kids, when coming from home and going into the school system, they at least know how to read a Dr. Seuss book. And also grocery stores.
Yeah, but Dr. Seuss is nice.
Well,
They gotta read a whole sentence now.
well, y'all work in the school system, I don't.
Let's hear from the to share from some of the ideas.
So,
You have to explain some things that you.
Sure. Well, I'll just talk about the first one.
He never changed the heat.
Since so much of what the city needs in all aspects of life in the city is access to resources that are not from within our city. Our one big idea we had was that we would hire as a staff member of the city a professional grant writer.
Yes.
That grant writer would then work with community organizations seeking funding, work with our staff who are already in the process of writing grants to provide aid and assistance to their grant writing processes, free them up to do some of the more minutia of running their divisions or departments or the city. but also be a sounding board to those grants as they come through. They would obviously have to be signed by Haley or a department head, depending on where those grants were going to, but also to create on our website basically a grant database for community organizations. So if you wanted to, if the local 4-H wanted to do something with the Y in the city and needed some grant funding, go to the website. Here's 6 places you can apply for funding for that thing. You're looking for helping with after school programs. Here's a bunch of grants that you can write and then that grant writer would then facilitate that grant writing. So you have a centralized office for outside resources coming into our city. And that would impact everything from finding funding for daycare, finding funding for job training, finding funding for creating a STEM connected health clinic or what have you. Because it's all going to come down to, can we get resources from outside to help us realize our dreams?
Okay, let me interrupt here for just a second, because this helps me. Thank you very much. This helps me illustrate a little bit of what we want to try and do here. So the big idea here is to vastly expand the amount of outside resources that are coming into the city, both in the city hall and into other community groups in the city. But that's the big idea. You're going to get into the goals now. We'll talk about that in the next section. So you've identified some goals as well. And one of the goals is that, let's put a time frame on it. Sometime in the next 2 years, we create an office for a professional grant writer here. And in that same period of time, we are going to be establishing resources that are available on the city's website that other community organizations who are looking for outside resources can go and find. So what you've done here is
Steps 1 through 5. Sorry.
Yeah, you know what? That's exactly right. And I'm not being critical.
No, I understand.
This is very helpful to me to illustrate where we're wanting to take this. So as we get into this, don't be afraid to share this, because I'm taking all these notes down, but this allows me to give you a little bit of a preview as to what comes next. Okay. So, yes.
Another idea we spoke on is communication and branding. Increased communication, the cross section of the community, including all modalities, because we'll get into the goals, but increased communication and branding in terms of selling our community in a positive manner and making sure people know about that, what is going on.
So even to your own residents.
Yes,
Even to our own
and we were speaking in terms of what Councilman Williams was talking about at previous council meeting about neighborhood planning councils, advisory councils, whatever. On top of various electronic
And technology. How do we reach the senior citizen as well as the youth and the young adult, the professional young adults?
Good. Others that you want to highlight. What we're going to do here as we go through this, is to identify all these. The next section here, we're going to get there, I hope, fairly quickly, but we want to have you identify some very specific goals. Some we're already getting. And when I say specific, I want you to identify them. There will be a lot of work that Haley and her staff are going to do to flesh those out. We don't have enough time to do that here today, but there will be additional work. So, but we want you to start identifying those. So, we're all on the right track here. We're going to just keep this moving along. So, other big ideas need to make their way onto that.
Do you want?
I think you must have had your hand up. So,
yeah, we had a note taker, and I was just. He's the one that took our notes on, so, but go ahead.
So do you want what we talked about too?
yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna go to the biggie, and that's Lansing. We need to let Lansing know more about the needs of Albion. I was talking about the Dalrymple site and the Albion Malibu site. Lansing now is looking for places to build buildings and stuff, to have different companies come in and do things. And if they know that we have land, but the land needs to be cleaned up in order for people to put a building there to do whatever needs to be done. And I just said squeaky wheel gets the oil. So we need to start being a squeaky wheel to Lansing. so that they know more about what Albion has to offer, as much so as what Albion needs. Next thing was senior housing. Senior housing, and also I've been talking to people whose parents and things are getting older, and they're in nursing homes that's outside of Albion. They're in Battle Creek and Lansing and places like that. And they were talking about how much more convenient it was if Albion had a place here to where they could go and visit their people every day. So there's something that we need to work on too. Positive youth programs. There's a lot of youth programs, but I don't think we teach our kids how to do things to help people. And I don't think I told you this in the other one too, to help people without charging. So if you had a youth program to where on a Saturday, we're going and rake the leaves of a senior citizen who's too old to rake their own leaves, or we're going to shovel the snow or something like that. But that would be another thing too. And I'll stop. Oh, one more thing. Rid of vacant, deteriorating buildings. Because we were talking about having a nice restaurant here in Albion. Well, right up there, that Chinese restaurant, if somebody's broke windows there, I see a lot of people hanging around there at night, which probably means that's probably where they spend the night. Because there's homelessness here in Albion too. But if you could take a place like that and either have, sell it or whatever, nice place for a nice restaurant.
All right. Okay. Well, one that they have is improved quality housing, but I think that's dovetail in with senior housing, just housing in general, perhaps. You can kind of extrapolate from there. Job training and education was one of the first things we talked about. That might dovetail with some of the other ideas as well. I think you touched on this, the technology partner. I mean, that fits in with some of the communication. What they have, so all of that's easy to get several of them. And then I think to talk about the dissociation from schools, I think is actually more of a goal than it is the best idea. That's what I had in my notes. Okay.
I got a question about that.
Sure.
Disassociation from the schools. Can you clarify
There were
that?
some specific things that were mentioned, that a lot of the, not that all of your Albion youth go to Marshall schools, but they can go to other schools with the schools of choice, but there's discrimination issues that have occurred.
Okay.
I don't want to say the schools have merged because it wasn't really merged.
All right.
Yeah, so the idea I talked about was some of us were involved in that decision, which we of course now regret in hindsight. And this council actually voted on the city of Albion would associate with the Marshall Public School System. So my idea was, do we have to? Since some less than 50% of our local students go to
Other
Marshall
schools.
Public Schools, can we disassociate? And what's the ramifications for doing that? Just saying, we embrace the fact that we are not associated with any individual public school. We encourage our parents to seek out a school district that best fits the needs of their student, rather than having the default being Marshall.
Gotcha.
If I may, I'm just curious, because I don't know the answer. Do you have any charter schools here?
No.
Okay.
But not here.
That's in Marshall.
It's in Marshall.
Yeah, but I'm talking about in Albion.
Not in
So that's, that may be a way in which you
Right.
can have something like that or see that. All right, I'm making on the big ideas list. Summarizing here. All right, good. Not going to wait for a lot of time here. I want to begin now. May I have that PowerPoint back up again, please? Share screen. I have to stay on track. So make sure I do. Do it from the current slide.
Left.
Left a little bit.
Right now, I got
Go
no
over.
lights.
See where it says.
There you go.
Okay. When we want to move into talking about goals, we've already had some here, and again, for the interest of time, we're not going to have a lot of time to spend on this. I thank you for those comments that you've made. Some of these really work better as goals than they do as big ideas, and we'll work that around as we prepare our report for you to try and make that as clear as possible. So we'll do make some suggestions about how we might consolidate some of these statements and come up with a manageable agenda for yourself here. As we're talking about goals, I recommend you, and this is not mine, I recommend that you utilize this as a way of discussing your goals. They're specific. That means you can really tell what we're talking. It's not general, it's a very specific thing. So it is work with Albion College to establish a charter school in this city, as an example. Now, you don't have to do that. But that's a very specific goal that you could identify. I only use that as an example. But SMART goals, specific, measurable. There are metrics associated with it. You can identify what it is that you're trying to achieve and know when you've gotten there. They're assignable. That is, someone's responsible. It's Haley, it's Ian, it's one of your other staff people. When there's a goal set, someone needs to be the one whose job it is to make sure that it gets done. If you don't have anybody that you could assign it to, then that's not going to get accomplished. It has to be that. It has to be realistic. You know, it can't be pie in the sky. When you set goals, it's got to be something that you have a reasonable expectation that you can achieve. And finally, time related. That is, you know, we know we're going to be. We want to achieve it within 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is. So when you're thinking about goals, the part we're going to be worrying about today is to be specific about it. What are some of the specific action items that you might want to think about? I want to talk quickly about how you nurture great goals. Focus on the future, not the past. You can't change the past, but you can affect the future. So focus on the future. Don't focus on the limitations of the past. And this is the second one. Focus on possibilities, not limits. You're not constrained by whatever your circumstances are. You have ample opportunities to figure out ways to overcome those. And finally, and this is one of the hardest lessons for people to recognize, is you focus on abundance, not scarcity. We're always accustomed to thinking about that resources are scarce. We don't have the money we'd like to have. We used to have bigger tax base than we have, and so that limits what we can do. I think that when you talk about creating an avenue by which you bring additional outside resources into the community, that's focusing on abundance. I have always said, if it's a great idea, there's always a way to get it accomplished. If it's a great idea, there's always a way to get it done. And I've seen this time and time again, that when you're prepared, the resources oftentimes are there and available.
There you go.
So you have to keep that philosophy in mind. All right, so with that, what I want you to do is begin, and I had originally planned that we would do this in small groups, but we don't have the time. So we're gonna do this collectively, which means that maybe aren't going to have as much time to be as thoughtful as what you would like. We'll work with that limitation here as we go forward. What I want you to do now is to begin thinking of those big ideas that you had identified, those kind of longer term things. Are there some specific goals that you think are reasonable for you to begin attacking in the next 3 years? Think about what you have previously given Haley and that she's been reporting to you on. Those are some of the very specific goals. But if you look at these particular big ideas, what are some specific goals that you have that you think should be addressed? We've already identified a couple. We don't need to repeat those. But what other specific goals might you identify at this time that you would think the staff should be working on? Again, I want to be specific. Yes. I see your hand up. Calling on you.
Thank you so much. one thing that, I want to implement about, when we're doing, goals for the city is our streets. I have at least like 3 streets. I know it's a big thing in Albion, but, from my perspective, I think about my precinct and the things that they go through, as far as, like a street millage. It's not very many people here. It's a lot of older people here. People in my precinct, they are mostly on fixed income, because they are older, and the barriers of being taxed for, our streets is very tough on them. So I think about them, all the time. And, one of the struggles in my area is by the college area, to where it's, the streets are so small. We do have a lot of, traffic coming, to my area where, the college, dorm is located, and we do have people from out of town come into this specific area. So, one of my challenges is to get, a couple streets done over there through partnerships, so that the people that does live in this area, they can have the emergency support without having, extra, barriers as far as the streets and potholes, as far as, addressing the issue of college students parking, in front of their residence, where they can't have their family members come. So I'm really trying to work on, getting a specific area, cleaned up, so that when we do have, people from out of town that come to drop their kids off, to college, it can look nice in that specific area. So that's one of the things that, I'm trying to loop in. If I don't get it done, I at least want to get it put in place.
She's just trying to get her potholes done before mine.
You know what, I'm gonna leave that. Let's sort out. We don't have a role with it. Other specific goals, specific things that you would like to see that addressed here as we think about those big ideas, and I will highlight here and mention that there are some fairly specific goals that are already incorporated into your recent master plan update. What we'll try to do is to see how those goals then align with what the big ideas are and how those interface with one another. I'm confident that there will be some overlap in there. So if we don't hit on everything today, we'll certainly be looking at your master plan to see how we can make sure that you're not reinventing the wheel, but there is consistency and conformity there as well. Haley?
I shouldn't share this as a big vision, but have the proper infrastructure in place to support not only our residents, but then we know, we're hopefully planning to have more developed downtown area in the community as a whole, so that from roads to water, sewer, as the big vision. But then if you look at small, we need to finalize that, our transportation asset management. And the final piece of that is identifying the funding source to carry out that plan. So if we can get that part completed, then we will have an asset management plan in place to start addressing some of our roads to improve that.
Yes, I would like to really focus on getting the grant writer, someone to help bring more resources and funds into the city.
Now, that has been an ongoing conversation that we've had, and I think the direction that I received from interim city manager, as well as the city manager and the mayor, was that it'd be better served, we'd be better served if we had targeted grant opportunities that we wanted to work on, and we establish a grant writer specifically in that area. So targeting a certain project, and then looking for the funds for that area instead of hiring somebody as staff.
So the idea that I had is that this would be a no cost hire to the city.
Right.
Because they fund themselves.
The grant writer would fund themselves with grant resources. I mean, right now, when we have a street project, we get Reitman to write the grant, and then they pay themselves from that grant, those grant writing services. So we would create that. I think the advantage to this idea would be, it would not just be about city services, whether it's roads or buildings or economic development, but it would also be a community outreach for local nonprofits to have resources. These small single individuals who are mentoring kids and need some funding for something, or the Y, or the 4-H, or the theater, or whatever. These nonprofits who don't have resources to write grants, providing them with that opportunity. So this grant writer will be, you know, will seek the aid from individual entities that are already writing grants for us, but also would expand on that so that projects that can come up from within the community can also be assisted.
Well put.
And while they're looking for one grant, they might run into something else.
Exactly.
down the road.
Well,
Something we need.
well put. And thank you for saying that. That is exactly what I said earlier.
That's what.
And so we will deliberate, focus on the future, not the past. I'm on board with that, but you know, just
No, I understand.
wanting you guys to know. So as a goal, I would also like to see that we work with the MSP community service grants through the police department. So we would have to have a partnership basically between the police department and local organizations, where the organization would then come to local organizations that work with at-risk youth would then come to the police department, and they would help them or assist them in looking for grant funding. Of course, we'd have to put some stipulations in there as far as making sure that the 501(c)(3)s or whatever were adequate and had past reporting histories that were adequate as well. But it would allow them, and not just at-risk youth, I think there's also different programs that we could work with that they offer grant funding for, but we're not currently bringing that grant funding here into the community. So I think there's a great option there for additional funds and funding as well that we've just totally been missing out on.
One thing I want to point out is on some of the other discussion back and forth here, I think are all valuable comments that should come up through a process that Haley and her staff will be using as she fleshes out goals and those kinds of things. So I think all of that's valuable. One of the things I'm going to leave here, and I hope that you take with you, is I developed a tool that I call 10 questions for innovators. And I brought enough so that you can each have several of them, but there's a series of 10 questions that are intended to be asked as you're developing new initiatives. And if you work through this, it's really creating that narrative in the form of like a business plan. Doesn't have the financial pro forma with it. That's something you would do as well. This helps you ask the right questions to make sure that you're identifying the kinds of things. I know there's some of that I think on the table in the other room. We definitely have some here as well. All right, other yes.
Hope that one will this year would be to work on the infrastructure needed for the new industrial park. So if it's something specific, I would say that I believe that entails and it will be, it will take multiple years to do this, so it can't be done this year, but we need to be out front of the water tower, water, so I just would say that one specific goal targeted should be based on what parts of that project that you're gonna get done. Can we endeavor to do this year? So there's a supply chain issue involved with that, so there are things outside trends and social and economic issues outside our control. We need to get in front of those. And then the other goal I would really like to see some thought put into, if we have time, how big do we want to be, so that we're sure as we look at these infrastructure issues that we're building to the future. So still I would pester you, I guess, to vision, maybe as a goal, it's a vision, if you want to be 10,000 strong, if you want to be 20,000 strong, and then because that's going to really drive your infrastructure.
Right. Yes.
More transparency with the public.
I'm sorry, for transparency.
Yeah, with the public. Because a lot of times they'll call you and they will say, well, I heard this and I heard that, and you don't even heard it and you're uncomfortable. And plus on top of that, they need to know if we want them to support.
I like to refer to this as recognizing the public as your partners in governance. Yeah, and I think that's what we're really talking. I'm a big advocate. I'm on your side with this one. I don't know about any of the rest of the council here, but I'm on your side. Because I think it's critically important to the success of everything that you do, that you're as transparent as possible with the public and all the matters. All right, Mr. Williams, go to you and then.
All right, I would like for us as a council to be able to change the perception of council by developers and future businesses that may plan on coming here. I want us to be viewed as a favorable and desirable community to come to, and a city to work with, one that is more receptive of new development and growth. Now, I think one of the things that we may need to address is making sure that roles are clearly defined and we don't have overlapping in those roles, so that when a developer does want to work with the city, they know specifically who they need to speak with, and that same person can take them through start to build out to execution of whatever project that they may be working on. That way we don't have different hurdles present themselves that conflict with what someone else probably had already told them. Yeah.
Any other specific goals that you want to identify? Yes, I'm sorry, I had forgotten. I said you were next, and I'm glad you raised your hand again.
So I just wanted to touch on the basis of communication. One of the barriers for fourth precinct is communication to our senior citizens. So I've been doing some research about what other communities are doing for senior citizens to help them to receive information about what's going on in the city. A lot of them have the different senior villages, like a senior fork center or Clearwell services, where they actually go in and maybe buy the little smaller versions of a laptop. You know, they give out maybe 3 a year to senior citizens that do sign up. But I also thought about digital signs. We struggle with getting information out about what maybe our city manager may be doing or our city clerk may be doing. I had a vision of maybe having a digital sign out there that will help our city manager put information out to the public. And as far as attracting people to come into the city for the different corridors, you could have a digital sign also that may draw people in to say, hey, you know, on Thursdays, Albion has farmers market, and they see it right there on the highway. They may want to come to the farmers market. So I think signage is a good idea. Digital is what people are going to now. I think that is a big thing of mine. Housing is a big thing of mine also, because I can see where people are struggling, our elderly are struggling to keep what they work so hard for, and really don't want to move into something else because they have worked so hard and raised their families in it. But we do need a place for our seniors to go, so that people that are coming up and doing great at jobs and want to have some housing, they can move into these houses if we get our seniors somewhere and get them somewhere safe. So that was just my vision of housing.
Let me ask you on that particular topic, if I may. If you're thinking about what the city might hope to accomplish in the next 2 or 3 years as it relates to housing, whether it's housing for seniors or more broadly, what would you identify as the first thing? I mean, I don't need to put you on the spot, and if you say
You're doing it.
About that far, that's what we have a city manager for. That's the kind of answer I've heard in the past. But I thought perhaps there was something that maybe, say, if we just did this one thing, get us started in that direction. If you don't have that, that's fine.
I think what will get us started in that direction is to have somewhere where our seniors will feel safe, because sometimes they don't feel safe. And I have experienced it when I go out and talk to the elderly, they may open the door about this much, but the more they see my face, I might get about this much of the door open. So it is progress to me, but if I can find a safe place to put them and they are comfortable with it, that will allow some of the people that are trying to grow in HUD homes, they might want to come out and start doing their own thing, and that gives up opportunity for somebody else that may be struggling and need help with HUD assistance. So I think putting our seniors somewhere safe is going to start our housing.
All right. Williams, back to you.
All right, I got a few things, but we can use them as bullet points. So equitable land use, just ensuring that people aren't being displaced from certain neighborhoods, priced out of the neighborhoods. And I know that may, like for the elderly, that may mean a tax incentive, but just making sure that they know that the tax incentive is there, so they're locked in at a certain rate, if that's a possibility. I know in some communities and that's also, something that the state allow, so we can figure that out. Youth employment. I know the EDC director mentioned jobs and youth employment as well. So maybe that'll be something that she's able to tackle, but youth employment definitely at the top of the list. Another one, it was a problem that presented itself with one of the large road projects that we did over the course of the last year and a half. If we could establish a policy for road construction oversight, so that we know when that project is complete, that it is truly complete and done to a certain standard. That may just be something that needs to be addressed, but I know we had to go back and redo just a small portion of what was previously done because of an issue that had taken place. But just something that we may want to consider factoring in when we're doing these projects, because we may not go back to that road for 40 years.
Yes. Even if we improve the housing availability, we still have to do some financial literacy training to our residents so that they know, but so that we can do partnerships as Councilman Waller said, we can work with various banks so that they can help educate what principal mortgage insurance is, what a fixed rate is, what it kind of penalty where it is. So I think financial literacy and also just education about what the tax bill reads. So recently I noticed that my PRA exception was 0 and it should have been 1 if I did update that back to Albion. So things like that even someone I appear to be knowledgeable with some I didn't know what that meant. And so the state monthly on my winter tax bills. So I'm sure it's not the only person that is being impacted by this knowledge. So the more we can train citizens about what their tax bill may mean or what it takes to purchase a home, I think the better. One thing I would put it in
All right, Mr. Williams, I'm going to give you the last one here.
Okay,
And then we got to move on to the next section really, really quickly. Okay.
I got you.
I mean, I wish we had more time.
No problem.
And I really.
I'll make it short.
I have been told we're out of here, so we're going to get.
I'll make it short. We had a summer youth program here before called Power for Kids. I think we should make an attempt at bringing that back. We don't have to go into detail. Everybody here has experienced or seen Power for Kids. So I think that would be something that would be great for the community.
Okay, all right. We're going to move on and talk. I was going to break you up. We're not going to do that. Too much time going back and forth. So we're going to do the next section here as a large group once again. This is the strategy portion. You've been, well, you talk about your goals and you talk about the big ideas. That's kind of the what. The strategy is how do you get this done? And there are a couple of techniques you can use. The 5 whys helps you to drill up to a little bit higher level. But this is the question that you really want to be thinking about is, like, things you want to accomplish. What are the big ways in which you decide how you're going to do that? Okay. So you have a lot of, big ideas, you have some very specific goals that you want to achieve, but what are the overarching paths that you're going to follow here in order to achieve that? Let me offer you a couple of examples from the things that I've already heard you say here, which is one of your strategies is to greatly increase the amount of outside financial resources that are coming into the community. That's one of your strategies. You disagree with me if you've heard something different here, but I see that as one of the key strategies that seems to have come out in a number of different comments that have been made. Another strategy relates to greatly expanding the amount of communication that you're doing in a whole range of areas. So there's communication to the public to be more transparent. There's communication about advertising to the larger world. There's communication as it relates to how you interface with developers that are thinking to coming here. So one of your strategies would be potentially to craft and implement a comprehensive communication strategy, comprehensive communication plan. So I'm going to offer those too, but when you're thinking about those kinds of big things, are there some other strategies like that that are going to be the things you can constantly refer to and say, yeah, if we're thinking about doing this, how does it fit with our communication plan? How does it fit with our resourcing plan that we have here to attract more resources? Are there other things like that that you would identify in the next few minutes that you would say are similar to that, that are kind of these, think about it this way, and that is, you have a destination in mind, and there are paths that you can walk to get. Oh, that's what I'm talking about. What are the routes that you're going to take? One of those routes is communication. One of those routes is outside resources. Are there other routes like that? You have kind of the super highways that get you where you want to go, that you would identify as being things that are going to be unique Albion strategies for you that are specific to you here, but that are big and things that are going to last a long time for you. This is always the hardest question. I'm glad we have a volunteer here to go first. Thank you.
Guinea pig, okay. But something, but something I think, the infrastructure in terms of industry that Virgie mentioned, that's going to be long lasting, is something that we need to bring people in. So I think, I guess infrastructure for industry would be one of the main things that I think we should focus on.
Okay, I think that's an excellent addition to the list. Thank you.
And Vivian, I appreciate that insight, because that is something tangible that us as city government has influence over. A lot of things that we were talking about today are going to require partnerships, because those are things that, as we know, that's not infrastructure. It's not in a budget, but we can definitely work diligently with partners to help us meet those goals.
Thank you. And I did note that, and I was going to raise that because that is another common theme that's come out from the comments here. And I think that truthfully, find that in all successful communities these days that they have really robust partnerships that let them get done. It's not all what you're going to do just within the four walls.
Just a few more. We didn't say very much about downtown development, but I guess I don't know if that goes along with infrastructure. But if you ride down our streets compared to Marshall, and you see all of the empty, all of the empty stores, that's a deterrent. Like, why would I want to move here? And all of these vacant properties are here. So downtown development, the curb appeal, you know, of a community, you look at their downtown area and you have a general idea of what kind of community it is. Is it a dying community? Or if it's is it prosperous?
Let me say, first of all, thank you. I think that's a really excellent idea, and I think we've heard that kind of thing talked about here several different times. I would suggest that when you look at that broader strategy, we also know that there is an interest in addressing similar kinds of perceptions about your residential neighborhoods. And so that focus on image and the appearance, the aesthetics of the community need not only be just the downtown.
Right.
That larger view is we're
Right.
concerned about that in our neighborhoods as well. And so,
Exactly.
yes, downtown revitalization projects is a portion of what we might do to accomplish that. But code enforcement or training programs for homeowners that teach them how to maintain their houses, those are all things that are going to be important to helping achieve that healthy image of the community.
Exactly.
Ms. Reed?
That's true. That's what I've been talking about because I'm on the land base. And I go by to see the properties that the land bank has up. But then when you see the properties next to it, it's so deteriorated and junky and messy until who wants to buy a property next to that? You know, and you're absolutely right. You need to look at your neighborhoods too. Because that's where the people are going to be looking for homes.
Right.
I agree with you, Vivian, though. You ride downtown and there's nothing there. And just like we were talking about in the meeting before, I've been asking for a store for about 25 years, no shoe store. So then when I go outside of Albion to buy a pair of shoes, that's where I have lunch. That's where I see a movie or something like that, which is taking away from Albion. Where if that was here in Albion, I could do all of that right.
Right. And what I would say about Albion, based on my experience over the years, is that yes, you have some appearance issues, but in the downtown in particular, there are good bones there. There's stuff to build on there. And so that is an attraction to developers.
Yeah, but your
They will
neighborhoods-
look, developers coming into your downtown will look beyond those surface appearance things and see the potential. And I've seen it in community after community after community. Mr. Williams, I think you had your hand up. Next. So.
Yeah, your question again was, how do we get to the things that we've addressed previously? Okay. I would definitely say through funding. A reoccurring conversation that I'm having recently is possibly the potential for the lobbyists that would be able to also address some of the issues that we have here through going out and getting funding for different projects and tasks that we deem necessary. We know that we don't want to raise taxes. The road millage was voted down. So, you know, there's a different way that we have to address bringing funding in here into the city of Albion.
Jobs, you get the jobs.
So I would, on the how, again, as one of the strategies is, I would encourage holding the EDC and even the DA to some degree accountable for what you want done. And I would hope somebody would want to hear from me on a regular basis and develop some of that communication for the community. So I'm happy to become accountable to lead in a lot of these economic growth, housing, community development, jobs. Like, you really should be holding me accountable for that. I'm happy to be on the hot seat. You know, we have a really strong board, and we believe we can, you know, do a good job. I mean, we want people, you know.
If I may just, real quickly, I appreciate that comment. I have a different way of characterize that, which is to think in terms of alignment. And so one of the overall strategies that you should have going forward here is to make sure that you and your local partners are all aligned. So you're all on the same path, all heading in the same direction.
Exactly.
So.
And I would argue that with regarding to engaging with Lansing, that's sort of what EDC staff are supposed to be doing. That's the same thing that EDA staff are supposed to be doing. that they're, you know, and our city manager and our mayor are engaging with other government leaders. And as long as we provide them time and resources to be able to do that sort of work, then I think then that gets covered.
And I think the alignment part is very important because not looking back, but just for a second, sometimes we're on such different pages. Because the council wants to do something, EDC wants doing something else, you know, community foundation is, so partnership alignment, I think is one of the major things that we, to get on the same page, communication wise. That's all I say.
To piggyback off of that, communication, I would like to see, project mapping or Gantt charting associated with some of these projects that we're working on, so that we can always gauge where we should be, where we currently are, and if we're hitting our targets at those set points and benchmarks.
Thank you for that. One of the recommendations that I was going to be making in my report really related more to what I saw in the master plan, which is it's broken out very nicely in terms of identifying specific goals, objectives, priorities, and timeframes. And one of my recommendations to Haley is going to be to develop the tools that allow for easy reporting and tracking of that. And there are some things that can be done through Microsoft 365 and that kind of thing that would allow for sharing broadly in the organization, but to do exactly what you're talking about, be very specific format on those things as well.
Yeah, we used to have a dashboard.
And the dashboard is helpful, but the dashboard summarizes. And I think that again, as you get into this, Haley, you're going to want to make sure, because you're going to have a lot of moving parts. That I like to say, this dates me, those of you that used to watch the old Sullivan show, remember the plate spinners? Well, you know, there's city managers have to keep a lot of plates spinning. And we need tools that allow us to do that and then to report up through dashboards and other ways, so that there is that constant flow of information back and forth. I think we have time for one more comment, and then Madam Mayor, I'm going to turn it over to you for final comments here. Is there one final comment from somebody other than Mr. Williams? We've had a lot of work today, and just great participation and comments. I hope that you are not taking me seriously on that. I might want to come back and do additional work for the.
I was going to say, maybe next time it would be a day.
Yeah, hopefully we can get you back a little bit sooner, than later.
Well, I'm going to come back free once, so we may be able to do that. But
We like free.
comment from everybody here before I. It doesn't look like it. I want to thank Madam Mayor, you and the council members and the staff for your participation today. I certainly thank you for the invitation to come and to be able to do this. My brother pointed out that I used, but the previous one I did as a template for you, and I failed to change one Springfield to Albion. So I apologize for that. This one put together a little bit differently for your needs than theirs. But I knew who I was working for. I actually did Springfield, someone similar to this last week. So there was that one error that was made, and I do apologize. I'd like to be more precise in my work. So I told him he's going to be reviewing the report before it goes out to catch any of the typos, because he seems to see them a lot better than I think probably his eyes are younger. So, Madam Mayor, I'm turning back at you, but thank you very much.
Hi, is that?
Well, we thank you for coming in today to help facilitate our discussions. Definitely a lot of great ideas were brought to the table, a lot of thoughtfulness in regards to keeping our citizens' perspectives in mind and needs. This is a lot that we're going to need to digest and to figure out how we are going to proceed, but we got to be mindful that Haley and her team are the ones that are going to have to come up with the tactics. The tactics are the how and how to's, the applicable ways of meeting these goals. So definitely, I hope we take time to digest what we discussed today, so that when we move forward in creating agenda items for upcoming council meetings, we can incorporate this to be able to push that needle forward. So with that being said, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Public comment.
We already had public comment.
Oh, okay, we're good.
Beginning.
All right, I just want to make sure we're.
So moved.
Support.
Support.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned, 12 p.m.